Yeah, Blake Matthias from the University of Tennessee. I'm actually a PhD candidate, just finishing my doctorate. Headed to Louisiana State University as an assistant professor here next semester. Yeah, so the motivation behind this research is kind of maybe a little bit unique. It's not much unlike an entrepreneur. Um, I grew up in family business, and I have a picture of myself actually as a baby in the business van that we had driving around. And so, actually, my career itself was motivated by those early experiences. I grew up in a family business. I started working for my dad before I was a teenager, um, and it just got me excited and interested in entrepreneurship. And so, the research that I do and the research questions that I ask are really influenced by those early experiences. And so my thinking was that if this was true of my own life and my own career, perhaps it was true of entrepreneurs as well. And this idea that their experiences that happened perhaps years or even decades before they started a business had a major impact on the type of entrepreneurs they became, the decisions that they made in their business, and kind of the growth trajectory of their ventures. Yeah, so before I wrote the paper, I really had no knowledge of what imprinting was. And I think my knowledge of imprinting was back in biology class in middle school and learning about ducks, learning from their mothers and following their behaviors. And when I got into the interviews that I had done, it was more and more a story of imprinting and this idea that individuals learn something early in their life or at particularly sensitive stages of their life. So it could have been during their formative years, could have been during college or during their early career. And those experiences, they weren't just something that an individual learned, but they really stuck with them over time. And so what we found is that these things that had happened to entrepreneurs were really imprinted on them. They lasted with them throughout their life, and they influenced their decision over time. And so within the research on imprinting and entrepreneurship, really took one of two approaches previously. And most were really focused on the organization. So this idea that the organization was imprinted. So one stream kind of said that the decisions that an entrepreneur makes early in a venture's life have an impact on the venture throughout its life. And the second kind of stream of research was that the conditions when a venture was founded have an impact on the venture. So if a venture is founded during a recession, that organization is likely to be very frugal in how they spend their money, and it has an impact on kind of the way that an organization is structured throughout its life. And the idea behind the paper was maybe it's not just organizations that are imprinted, but also individuals. And so we kind of looked at the lives of entrepreneurs and said, what ways are they imprinted? Who are they imprinted by, and when are they imprinted? Yeah, so we didn't, as I mentioned before, imprinting was something that was discovered through the research process, but really the way that I went about, so I did two things. I interviewed entrepreneurs, and then a year after, because I asked a lot of questions about the future and what they plan to do in the future, I followed up with all of my entrepreneurs a year after I did the initial interviews. And I actually began the interviews and got to this question the same way that we started this interview. And you asked me what motivated your research. So what are the origins of behind what you're doing? And with entrepreneurs, I did really the same thing. It was asking them, what motivated you to become an entrepreneur? What was it that drove you? And when you ask them that question, a lot of times we ask questions about entrepreneurs and we start with when they start the venture. But the idea behind the venture, the motivation behind it, sometimes has happened years before the venture has ever started. And so getting to that question was really asking about the past. So it was really set up in three ways. I began with the past. So what motivated you to start this company? Then it was focused, a third of the interview was kind of focused on the present. So what's going on now? What's going on in your business? How do you make decisions right now? What's currently consuming most of your time? And then the third part was asking about the future. So what do you plan to do? What are your plans for the next few years? And we were really interested in that because, again, talking about imprinting isn't just something that happens. We learn it one day and we apply it the next. It's really this process that unfolds over time. So it unfolds over months or years. So we really wanted to look at the past, the present, and the future within the interviews. So we went through and did content. We content analyzed all the interviews, and what we found is really these three what we refer to as sources of imprint. So three groups of experience that had a very distinct impact on entrepreneurs. And the first group were these individuals who were imprinted by family and friends. And so these were individuals who maybe, like myself, grew up in a family business, realized perhaps early on, hey, I really enjoy entrepreneurship. This is something that I want to do with my life. And what we found was that when they made decisions in their business, they relied on these family members and these perhaps close friends to make decisions. They didn't make decisions by themselves. They didn't necessarily have a board of advisors, but they relied on their family members. And then when they talked about their future, most of them, because they loved entrepreneurship and were passionate about it, they were pursuing many and oftentimes unrelated ventures. So they didn't focus on just one business, but they loved entrepreneurship. They loved starting new businesses, so they focused on many ventures. The second group of individuals were kind of what we think of as more hobbyist or inventor types. They were really imprinted by a particular technology area and the environment kind of around that. And so these individuals, when they made decisions in their business, they really relied on themselves. They didn't talk to others necessarily. Some of them were a little bit protective maybe of their idea. They may bounce ideas off other hobbyists or enthusiasts, but they were pretty self-reliant in making decisions in their ventures. And then ultimately, when they talked about their future or the future of their ventures, they, for the most part, really weren't motivated by making a lot of money. They really just wanted to continue pursuing this hobby because that's really what they got enjoyment out of it. They weren't excited about growing a huge business. They just wanted to engage in this hobby that they were passionate about. And then the third group of individuals were these people who were imprinted by prior work experience. So these were individuals who had 15, 20 years of perhaps corporate experience, and they said, you know what, I can do this better than the company that I'm working at. Or they said, I hate this boss that I'm working for, or there's an opportunity in the market and I see it because I've been in this business for so long. And they eventually started a venture out of that. And the way that they made decisions in their venture, because many of them came from larger organizations, they tended to delegate a lot of decisions. So they weren't self-reliant. They didn't say, I can do everything. I know how to do everything. They really had a deep knowledge of kind of one specific area. So they delegated a lot of their decisions and they kind of focused on their niche area. And then when they talked about the future, again, because they had such a deep knowledge in a particular field, they tended to focus on that venture. They weren't, unlike some of the other entrepreneurs, they weren't interested in starting a bunch of businesses, but instead they were really focused on growing a single venture. And so ultimately we kind of found these patterns of these three groups of entrepreneurs, if you will, and how these different influences that they had an impact on kind of the types of entrepreneurs that they became. Yeah, so for the entrepreneurial educators, I think that there's a clear pattern in how we can help these different individuals. And I think first gaining an understanding of what people's background is. Um, and and so for the first group, again, that I talked about, these people influenced by family, again, they're very interested in starting several different businesses. And so I think what they could benefit from is answering questions of how do you manage multiple ventures? We talk a lot about entrepreneurship in general, but for these entrepreneurs specifically, they're probably not just going to start one venture. They may have multiple ventures. And so how do they get perhaps the right people in place to manage each of these ventures for them? How do they balance all of that? For the second group of individuals, those people with kind of a passion for the technology side and kind of a focus, more hobbyist and inventor types, most of them really lack, not all, but most oftentimes lack the business knowledge of running the business. They have this great product, this great idea, but they don't know how to commercialize it. And so for these individuals, figuring out how to take a product and turn it into a business is really something that I believe they could benefit from. And then the third group of individuals, the people with lots of work experience, most of these individuals, again, they had such a narrow focus because many of them were coming from larger organizations that they hated doing the paperwork side of the business. It was the worst thing in the world to them. So I think for these individuals, perhaps training them on kind of the business side of the business, or perhaps finding people who can complement their skill sets. So finding people who have a business background and meshing or putting them together with these individuals could probably benefit them quite a bit. So I think the research shows that depending on the individual's background, there's different skill sets that they need. They're all ultimately hopefully going to be entrepreneurs, but what they need from an educational standpoint might be vastly different. And I think I get there's a lot of students in the business school who want to develop a technology company, and they've got the greatest idea for a new app, but they have no technology background. They don't know how to code. They don't know how to do anything else. On the flip side of that, you may have an engineer. Might be a brilliant engineer, brilliant technologist, knows how to code, but can't get in front of people and speak, pitch his idea, run a business. And so can you teach an engineer to become a business person? Can you teach a business person to become an engineer? And I think you can, but I think the perhaps more important question is, does that person want to do that? And does an engineer can, I think, become an entrepreneur without becoming a business person as well, if they find someone to partner with and somebody to work with. I think the worst thing to do is to take an engineer and say, you have to learn all of, you have to do the taxes each year. You're going to have to be the accountant. You're going to have to do all these things that you might loathe. Because I don't believe that an entrepreneur necessarily needs to do all of those things. By partnering with someone who complements your skill set, you can still be a very successful entrepreneur. Now, some people are gifted and can do both. They can be an engineer and a great business person at the same time. and a business person can be a great engineer as well. But I think it's figuring out that underlying passion and the underlying interest, and um, is this something that you want to do, or do you want to find other people to surround yourself surround yourself with that can help you out and help take your venture further. Yeah, if I was sitting with an entrepreneur today and giving them advice on, how this research matters, or how it might, impact their life, it's really, I think, goes back to the question of what has motivated you? What has been that major influence in your life? Is it a family motivator? Is it a passion for the technology? And this kind of bridges. I think it plays a minor role in the paper. But what I would tell people is that these are probably fueling your passions for the business. Um, if you are influenced by family and close friends, and you've always been passionate about entrepreneurship, you're probably going to be most happy by, and one of your central goals is going to be to launch new ventures. And so if I think if you get bogged down in one single venture, and you try to, the analogy I use is wear all the hats in one business and try to do it all, when your real passion is for starting new businesses, you're probably not going to be a very happy nor a very successful entrepreneur. If you're a hobbyist, enthusiast, inventor, and you try to grow a business and you try to stick with that venture, you might not meet your goals, because your passion is probably for creating and for the early stages and those challenges that you have in developing that new product and taking it to market. And as a venture grows, you bring in employees, the organization changes, and you might not be the person that's meant to run a major corporation, because you're really passionate about inventing things and creating things. So it would be to, caution them to lead their business forever, and maybe focus on the creative aspects of the business, and then maybe let go of the reins as the business grows. And then for the last group of individuals, my caution to them would be, maybe don't go off in 100 different ways. You have a unique skill set, and that you've been doing this, whatever it is, accounting, architecture, whatever your background is, you have this depth of knowledge that few others do, and that's probably a distinct advantage that you have. You don't necessarily have the great entrepreneurial experience that other people do, so you might be best served by focusing in on that area and exploiting that area. And so, I guess for each of those different entrepreneurs, I would give a different set of advice, but the core theme would be to stay true to what motivated you in the first place, and what your underlying passions are.